The rain was relentless that evening, drumming against the deserted streets of the financial district. Neon lights reflected in puddles like fractured memories, and the hum of distant traffic echoed off empty concrete walls. A man, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy coat, walked briskly under the weak glow of a street lamp, his polished shoes splashing through the shallow water. He was on his way to a private meeting at a high-rise overlooking the city, a meeting that could change the course of a global trade deal. Yet, for a brief moment, something entirely unexpected caught his eye. She was crouched near the corner of a dimly lit alley. A young woman, shivering violently, her coat threadbare, clutching a worn leather bag. Her eyes, wide and hollow from exhaustion, met his as if pleading silently. The man hesitated, the city's urgency pressing against him. He had a choice: walk past and preserve the schedule that governed his life, or pause and intervene. He approached slowly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice a mix of concern and caution. She shook her head, barely audible. "Cold, too cold." Without thinking, he removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric was warm and heavy, a shield against the unrelenting night. She looked up at him, and for a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them, a connection neither could define. Who do we choose to protect, even when it disrupts the path we've carefully carved for ourselves? She mumbled a faint, "Thank you," and disappeared into the shadows, leaving only a trail of questions behind her. The man paused, watching the alley empty, wondering if this fleeting act of kindness had meaning, or if it was just a shadow in the city's relentless tide. He returned to his meeting, but her image lingered, persistent and unshakable. Over the next few days, fragments of her presence began surfacing. An unclaimed taxi receipt with her initials, a forgotten notebook in a cafe, names scribbled in ink that suggested ambition, secrecy, and wealth. Was this stranger truly homeless, or was there more than met the eye? The investigation began quietly, almost instinctively. The man, a mid-level executive turned reluctant detective in his own life, tracked the faint breadcrumbs: city permits, business licenses, cryptic mentions in obscure investment journals. Each clue painted a picture that seemed impossible: an invisible billionaire, cloaked in poverty, moving silently through the underbelly of the metropolis. He found a warehouse near the outskirts of the city, abandoned yet meticulously organized, filled with stacks of anonymous parcels and documents. A single, flickering fluorescent light cast long shadows across the walls. He opened a ledger tucked in a crate, scanning numbers and company names that defied logic. She wasn't just surviving. She was orchestrating deals, charitable investments, and global initiatives from the margins of society. Why would someone with unimaginable wealth hide in plain sight, risking the cold and hunger that most could never endure? His mind raced. Every news article, every press release, every minor scandal suddenly clicked into place. The young woman he had handed a coat to was the architect behind funds that influenced international markets, the quiet force behind humanitarian projects that spanned continents. And yet here she was, vulnerable and shivering under the indifferent gaze of streetlights. He replayed the night over and over in his mind, the act of giving his coat now feeling like a symbolic gesture with consequences he could not yet measure. The streets seemed colder, the city more indifferent, and the lines between the powerful and the powerless blurrier than ever. And in that lingering silence, a chilling realization took hold. The man leaned against the wall of the office building, looking at the rain-soaked streets below. Somewhere in the city, she was moving unseen, powerful and invisible. And yet, he knew their encounter had changed something irreversible. What happens when a single act of kindness exposes the hidden truths of the world? The rain fell harder. Somewhere, in the shadows, she watched, waiting, knowing the world was far larger and far colder than most could imagine. The man leaned against the wall of the office building, looking at the rain-soaked streets below. Somewhere in the city, she was moving unseen, powerful and invisible. And yet, he knew their encounter had changed something irreversible. What happens when a single act of kindness exposes the hidden truths of the world? The rain fell harder. Somewhere, in the shadows, she watched, waiting, knowing the world was far larger and far colder than most could imagine. He found himself standing outside a luxury apartment block on the edge of the city. Cameras lined the entrance, security guards rotated with precise timing. And yet, she was nowhere to be found. A single note, slipped under the door of the concierge, read simply, "Some of us choose to remain ghosts. Why do some people hide in plain sight, wielding influence like a silent storm?" Later, he followed her trail to a clandestine meeting in a quiet warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The building was industrial, cold, with metal beams that groaned under the weight of secrecy. Inside, stacks of documents and crates revealed the scope of her operations. International relief projects, microloans to impoverished nations, secret funding for technological research. Each document carried her signature, coded and deliberate, a map of a world she controlled invisibly. A security camera flashed in the corner, catching her reflection in the glass. She was ordinary in appearance, a simple coat over a modest dress. Yet the energy she carried seemed capable of bending circumstances. Her presence was magnetic, yet hidden, a paradox he could neither ignore nor fully understand. How much of the world's power is invisible to the eyes of the many, yet felt by all? The man traced her movements, noting the anonymity she demanded. No press conferences, no media appearances, no public profile. And yet her fingerprints were everywhere. Disaster relief in Southeast Asia, investment strategies in Europe, silent interventions in failing economies. She was a ghost in the machinery of globalization, steering events from behind curtains no one saw. By nightfall, he found himself in a small cafe, alone, poring over maps, receipts, and travel permits she had left in plain sight, subtle breadcrumbs meant to be found only by those persistent enough. He realized she had been testing him, measuring his curiosity, assessing whether he could perceive the truth without being overwhelmed by its magnitude. In that quiet moment, he asked himself the question that would haunt him. Could a single human being really shape the course of nations without the world ever knowing? The answer seemed to pulse in every detail he uncovered. The abandoned warehouses, the ledgers with coded transactions, the quiet towns rebuilt without credit, the children receiving education they never knew funded by an unseen hand. Her power was global, her anonymity complete, and her strategy surgical. One act of kindness, the coat in the rain, was perhaps the only tangible connection he would ever have to her. He left the cafe as the streets emptied, the neon signs flickering, reflecting the weight of a hidden empire moving silently through chaos. The thought lingered, chilling yet thrilling. One person, invisible to the world, could hold more sway than governments, more influence than the most celebrated CEOs. And yet, she remained shivering in an alley weeks ago, a paradox he could not reconcile. What does it mean to meet a force of nature disguised as a stranger? As he walked past the city's high rises, he sensed that this encounter had begun a chain of events he could neither predict nor control. Somewhere in the shadows, she continued her work, unseen, untouchable, and perhaps watching him back. Somewhere in the shadows, she continued her work, unseen, untouchable, and perhaps watching him back. Days passed, but the man could not escape the thought of her, the girl he had warmed with a coat, now revealed as a force that spanned continents. He found himself standing outside another building, this one older, with rusted fire escapes and boarded-up windows. Inside, whispers of her presence lingered in every corner. The faint scent of jasmine, stacks of carefully labeled envelopes, and a single piano, its keys pressed unevenly as though someone had been composing in secret. He cautiously entered, eyes scanning for motion. Nothing stirred, yet the air was charged, as if the building itself held a secret heartbeat. On a table lay a stack of documents, contracts, charitable agreements, letters from foreign dignitaries. Each page carried the subtle signature of the young woman. Precise, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. A small journal caught his attention. Inside, handwritten notes detailed projects he had only glimpsed in news reports. Clean water programs in Africa, covert scholarships for displaced students, secret funding for medical research in war-torn regions. Each entry was dated meticulously, every detail accounted for. It was a private diary of a hidden billionaire, a map of a life lived in shadows. Why do some choose invisibility even when the world begs for recognition? The man's fingers trembled as he held the journal. He realized that every life she touched, every action she orchestrated, rippled far beyond the city streets. Governments relied unknowingly on her initiatives. Markets shifted according to decisions she never announced, and yet no one knew her name. She had created a parallel world, a silent empire built on empathy and secrecy. His investigation now took on a dangerous edge. Someone, somewhere, had noticed his curiosity. He began receiving subtle warnings. A locked gate he had never seen before, a car idling across the street too long, an envelope slid under his office door containing a single, chilling phrase. Curiosity can be costly. When does the pursuit of truth become a perilous journey? Determined, he persisted. Following her trail, he uncovered a network of warehouses and safe houses spanning the globe. Tokyo, Geneva, Nairobi, Sao Paulo. Each location was a node in her silent empire, meticulously organized, yet hidden behind layers of anonymity. Security cameras, encrypted messages, and trusted intermediaries ensured her work continued without exposure. In one warehouse, he discovered a series of old photographs. In each, she appeared ordinary, blending into crowds, walking with children in a park, handing out food in a market, quietly adjusting a medical kit in a refugee camp. There was no hint of the billion-dollar influence she wielded behind the scenes. The juxtaposition was staggering. A woman equally vulnerable as she was powerful, fragile, yet commanding the course of lives she would never meet. As he pieced together the narrative, a haunting thought took shape. The coat he had given her weeks ago was more than an act of kindness. It was a spark. A single gesture had bridged the world of the unknown and the unseen. And now, he was part of her story whether he wanted to be or not. Can a simple choice alter the trajectory of destiny itself? Night fell, and he sat alone in his office, the city lights casting shadows across his desk. The ledger, photographs, and journal lay spread before him. The realization was chilling. He had uncovered a power invisible to most of humanity, yet he could do nothing to control it. She moved through the world like a shadow, untouchable, watching, shaping, and waiting. And somewhere, he feared, his actions might have drawn attention he could neither predict nor escape. In that silence, he understood the magnitude of what he had discovered. A hidden billionaire existed not for fame, but for impact. And one day, the consequences of her invisibility and of his interference could ripple across the globe. The city seemed quieter that night, the rain absent, leaving only a fragile sense of anticipation. Somewhere, in a faraway warehouse, she was moving unseen, and he knew, with a deep, unsettling certainty, that the world would never be the same again. And he knew, with a deep, unsettling certainty, that the world would never be the same again. Weeks later, the man returned to the alley where it all began. The street was empty, slick with rain, and a lone street lamp flickered overhead. He wondered if she would appear again, the stranger who had been everything and nothing at once. But the alley remained silent, the shadows unmoved, the city indifferent. Yet, a single envelope lay at his feet, yellowed and slightly damp. Inside, a note in precise handwriting read, "Kindness reveals more than wealth ever could. But beware, curiosity has consequences." He felt a chill crawl up his spine. The coat, the journal, the warehouses, the global influence. It all had started with a simple act. A human gesture,